The market isn't your greatest enemy, your own emotions are. That's the timeless lesson at the heart of The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. Instead of chasing headlines or reacting to every market swing, this book introduces a surprisingly simple mindset that has guided generations of disciplined investors, including Warren Buffett. One powerful idea can completely change how you view every investment decision, not by predicting the market, but by responding to it differently. Let's begin with the principle that makes this approach endure. Never forget to like this video and subscribe to the Baani English channel. Let's begin a new journey together into the world of books.
I am so glad we are starting with that premise because, this book is just legendary.
It really is. I mean, Warren Buffett himself calls it by far the best book on investing ever written.
Right, which is basically the highest endorsement you could ever possibly get in the financial world.
Yeah, exactly. And what's wild is that it was originally published in 1949, but we're looking at the revised edition today, which has Jason Zweig's modern commentary.
Which I love because Zweig really bridges that gap. He shows how Graham's framework applies today. Because sure, the mechanics of the market change, right? We have like high-frequency trading and algorithms now.
Apps on our phones where you can trade in a second.
Exactly. But human psychology, that never changes. The fear of missing out, the panic, that is identical to how people felt 100 years ago.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive today. We aren't here to give you, hot stock tips or a secret formula to beat the market.
No, definitely not.
We want to unpack Graham's framework for making decisions and, honestly, how to protect yourself from your own self-defeating behaviors.
Because without that psychological foundation, no amount of math is going to save you.
Right. So let's start with this concept of the genius trap. There's this huge assumption in our culture that to build wealth, you need a genius-level IQ.
Oh, for sure. People think you need to be a math prodigy.
Right. But Graham just completely flips that. He redefines what an intelligent investor actually is.
He strips the whole brain power thing away. For Graham, intelligence in investing is a character trait. It is about patience and discipline.
Not your SAT scores.
Exactly. It has absolutely nothing to do with being able to do complex calculus. It's about emotional control.
And there is literally no better historical proof of this than Sir Isaac Newton.
Oh, this story is amazing.
It's wild. So we are talking about the guy who mapped out the laws of gravity, arguably the smartest man in the world. Yet back in the spring of 1720, he got caught up in the South Sea Bubble.
The absolute hottest stock in England at the time. Everyone was going crazy for it.
Yeah, a total frenzy. And at first, Newton actually acted rationally. He sensed it was getting out of hand, so he sold his shares and pocketed a massive profit.
Like 100% profit, right?
Yeah, doubled his money.
Yeah.
And he famously muttered this line about how he could calculate the motions of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of the people.
He knew it was completely irrational.
He did. But then he just had to sit there and watch the stock keep going up.
Oh.
His friends were getting unimaginably rich. And the FOMO, the fear of missing out, it just entirely took over his brain.
So he jumped back in.
He jumped back in at a way higher price, and when the bubble burst, he lost 20,000 pounds. That is over $3 million in today's money.
Wow. That is just devastating. The literal inventor of calculus, ruined by peer pressure and greed.
Right, because investing intelligence is like a thermostat, not a calculator. It's about regulating your temperature, your emotions.
That is a great way to put it. And we see this in modern times, too, like long-term capital management in 1998.
Oh, the hedge fund with the Nobel laureates?
Yeah, 2 Nobel Prize-winning economists and a team of math geniuses. Wall Street treated them like absolute royalty, but they lost over $2 billion in a matter of weeks.
$2 billion? That is insane.
And they didn't lose it because their math was wrong. They lost it because their massive IQs made them arrogant. They assumed the market would always behave rationally based on their supercomputer models.
But the market isn't a math problem.
Exactly. When Russia unexpectedly defaulted on its debt, people panicked. Humans acted irrationally. The models blew up, and the fund collapsed.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, though.
Sure.
If literal Nobel laureates and the guy who invented gravity can fail so spectacularly, what hope does the average person listening right now have? Like, shouldn't we just throw our hands up and walk away?
I get why you'd ask that, but Graham's answer is actually so empowering for the everyday person. The geniuses fail because they lack humility.
They think they're smarter than the market.
Right. They think their IQ makes them immune to risk, so they take uncalculated leaps. But a true investor knows they can't predict the future. They build disciplined systems to protect themselves from their own ego. So the average person actually has a huge advantage over the arrogant genius if they can control their character.
Okay, that makes sense. So if emotional discipline is the baseline, the first real test of that is knowing the difference between an investment and a speculation.
Avoiding the casino, basically.
Right. Because Wall Street loves to blur that line.
Right.
But Graham is very strict about it.
Very strict. He gives a three-part definition. For something to be an investment, it must, upon thorough analysis, promise safety of principal and an adequate return.
Safety of principal and adequate return.
Yes. And if a transaction falls short of any of those three, you are just speculating. You are gambling.
So wait, let's unpack that first part. Thorough analysis. If I spend like 6 hours reading tech blogs and watching videos about a new AI stock because everyone says it's going to the moon, isn't that thorough analysis?
Definitely not. That's actually the exact opposite of what Graham means.
Oh, really?
Yeah, true analysis means appraising the actual intrinsic value of the underlying business.
Not the hype.
Right, no hype. You look at hard metrics. Does the company have consistent earnings? Do they have real assets? What's their debt? You evaluate it as if you were going to buy the entire private business yourself.
Okay. So a speculator just looks at the ticker price.
Exactly. Speculators base their standard of value purely on what the market is doing. If you are just finding reasons to justify a price that's already soaring, you're speculating.
That makes me think of Jason Zweig's commentary on the 1990s tech bubble. He talks about this fund manager, Alberto Villar.
Oh, yeah, the Merindo Technology Fund.
Right. And in 1999, his fund was up almost 250%.
Yeah.
It was a superstar. He was literally mocking cautious investors in the media.
Basically calling them dinosaurs.
Yeah, he told them, you're in a horse and buggy, and I'm in a Porsche. If you don't like tenfold growth, go somewhere else.
But if you had listened to him and invested at the end of 1999, you would have lost nearly everything by 2002. It was one of the worst wipeouts in mutual fund history.
Because he wasn't looking at intrinsic value.
No, those dot-com companies didn't even have earnings. He was just speculating on momentum. And Wall Street actively encourages that, by the way.
Because they make money every time you trade?
Exactly. Speculation creates constant trading. And constant trading generates massive friction costs. It's not just the broker commissions anymore.
Right, there are hidden costs.
Yeah, the bid-ask spreads, the short-term capital gains taxes, the transaction fees. When you jump in and out of hot stocks, that transactional drag mathematically guarantees the house wins in the long run.
You just bleed out from 1,000 tiny cuts.
Exactly.
So avoiding that trap is crucial. Before we move on to how Graham actually divides up true investors based on their lifestyle, I want to quickly share something with you. If you'd like to explore this book in greater depth, consider reading the original version. You'll find the purchase link in the YouTube products section.
It is definitely worth picking up. The commentary alone is gold.
For sure. So once you commit to actually investing, Graham says you have to choose a specific style. And he divides investors into two camps: defensive and enterprising.
Defensive meaning passive, and enterprising meaning active.
Right. But what blew my mind is how he categorizes them. Modern financial planners usually tell you your style should depend on your age.
Oh, constantly. The rule of thumb is always about age.
Like if you're a 25-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
you should be 100% in stocks because you have 40 years to recover from a crash.
But Graham argues that is fundamentally flawed. Your strategy should have absolutely nothing to do with your age. It should be based entirely on the amount of time and effort you are willing to dedicate to your portfolio.
Time and effort.
Yes. The defensive investor is someone who wants freedom from effort and annoyance. They want an autopilot system.
So what does that look like in practice?
Graham suggests a balanced approach, like a 50-50 split between high-quality stocks and reliable bonds. And honestly, today, thanks to modern financial tools, the ultimate weapon for a defensive investor is the low-cost index fund.
Because it captures the whole market's return.
Right, you get the return without the stress, the research, or those friction costs we were just talking about.
But wait, modern advisors would totally push back on that for a young person. They'd say a 50-50 split is leaving way too much money on the table for a 25-year-old.
And that's where Zweig's commentary is so insightful. Modern advisors ignore the psychological and practical reality of life. Unexpected things happen.
Life events.
Yeah. You could lose your job in a recession, face a medical emergency, go through a divorce. You might need cash right when the market happens to be down 40%.
And if you're 100% in stocks, you're forced to lock in that massive loss just to survive.
Exactly. Plus, Psychologists have proven that we are terrible at predicting how we'll feel in the future.
Oh, totally.
When stocks are soaring, 100% equity sounds brilliant. You feel like a genius. But when you literally watch your life savings get cut in half, the psychological pain is intense. People panic and sell at the absolute bottom just to make the pain stop.
So the defensive strategy is like putting your wealth on a reliable autopilot so you don't touch the controls when you're panicked.
Precisely. It cushions the fall.
Now, on the other hand, you have the enterprising investor. This is the person manually flying the plane through the storm.
Yes. And they treat investing as a full-time business. They are manually hunting for undervalued companies, reading boring balance sheets, looking for discrepancies.
It sounds exhausting.
It is, and Graham is very clear. You cannot be half a businessman. If you aren't willing to put in the intense, continuous effort, do not try to be an enterprising investor.
Don't just dabble.
Right. Taking a few shortcuts and guessing will just lead to disaster. Stick to the defensive autopilot.
So if you are that enterprising investor doing the grueling work, you're going to be checking stock prices all the time.
Oh, constantly.
Which exposes you to what Graham considers the most dangerous force in finance. The market's mood swings. He has this legendary metaphor for it.
Ah, Mr. Market. It is brilliant.
It really is. He says, imagine you own a business and your partner in this business is a guy named Mr. Market.
And Mr. Market is deeply manic depressive.
Right. Every single day, he knocks on your door and offers to either buy your share or sell you his.
And most days, his price is fairly reasonable. It aligns with the real value of the business. But sometimes, his mood just completely takes over.
When he's euphoric, he thinks the business is going to take over the world.
Exactly. So he asks a ridiculously high price for his share. But then, when he's terrified and depressed, he thinks the world is ending. So he offers to sell you his share for practically nothing.
And the takeaway is that you have to use his moods to your advantage.
Mm.
He is there to serve you, not guide you.
Right. When he is euphoric, you sell to him at a premium. When he's depressed, you buy from him at a massive discount. Or you just ignore him.
But ignoring him is incredibly hard to do.
It's biologically hard. Zweig's commentary brings in this fascinating neuroscience. We are pattern-seeking animals. We are hardwired to think that whatever is happening right now will keep happening forever.
Right. If a stock ticks up 3 days in a row, our brains just assume it's going up forever.
And when you see that green arrow going up, your brain actually releases dopamine. It creates a natural high. Zweig calls it a prediction addiction.
Wow. A prediction addiction.
Yeah, you become neurologically addicted to that euphoric feeling, which makes you want to buy more exactly when Mr. Market is asking the most absurdly high prices.
And the reverse is true too, right?
Yes. When a stock drops, it triggers the amygdala, which is the brain's fear center. It initiates a fight or flight response. Your brain literally cannot tell the difference between a financial loss on a screen and a physical predator jumping out of the bushes.
That is wild. So you process a red arrow on your app the same way your ancestors processed a tiger.
Exactly. And research shows the psychological pain of a loss is more than twice as intense as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. That's why people panic sell. Logically, they know they should buy low, but their amygdala is screaming, run away.
I love the real estate analogy for this. Imagine a real estate agent calling you every single day at 1:24 p.m. to yell that your house's value just dropped 1.2%.
Just screaming into the phone.
And frantically asking if you want to sell before it goes to zero. You would never do that. You'd hang up on them.
You might call the cops.
Seriously. You wouldn't panic because you know the utility of your house. You know what it's worth to you. You just live your life. But we let our brokerage apps do this to us every single day.
We do. And the truly intelligent investor is comfortable owning a stock even if the market shut down and didn't give them a price quote for years.
They view a decline as a sale, not a tragedy.
Right. Like Zweig says, when TVs go on sale, we rush into the store. But when stocks go on sale, we run out screaming.
Okay, so if we are biologically wired to panic, and the market is this unpredictable, manic, depressive partner, how do we actually protect ourselves?
We need a mathematical cushion. And Graham distills his entire philosophy down to 3 words: margin of safety.
Margin of safety. That is the absolute core of the book.
If you remember nothing else from this discussion, remember those 3 words. It means never overpaying for an asset, no matter how exciting the hype is.
So how does that work practically?
Well, say you run the numbers on a business, the earnings, the debt, the assets, and you appraise it to be worth $100 a share.
Okay.
You do not buy it at $100. You wait until Mr. Market is depressed, and he offers it to you for $60.
Ah, so that $40 difference is your margin of safety.
Exactly. It's a buffer. It absorbs the impact of your own miscalculations or a sudden recession or just bad luck. You demand a discount to protect yourself from the unknown.
Warren Buffett has a brilliant analogy for this in the appendix. He compares it to building a bridge.
Oh, I love the bridge analogy.
Right. He says, you hire engineers to design a bridge that can carry 30,000 pounds. But once it's built, you only allow 10,000-pound trucks to drive across it.
You don't try to drive a 29,000-pound truck across a 30,000-pound bridge.
Exactly. You leave an enormous margin for error.
And investing works the exact same way. If an investment requires a company to execute absolutely perfectly for a decade just to justify its current price,
Then you have zero margin of safety.
zero. If growth slows even a tiny bit, the price collapses and you lose your money.
Which brings us right back to long-term capital management. The genius hedge fund.
They were driving 29,000-pound trucks across 30,000-pound bridges. They used massive leverage and had no margin of safety for a black swan event.
And when Russia defaulted, the bridge collapsed.
Exactly. Which ties into Pascal's wager. Peter Bernstein, via Jason Zweig, brings this up. Pascal was a mathematician who said that when it comes to belief in God, the consequences of being wrong matter far more than the probability of being right.
Survive the consequences.
Yes. In investing, you have to focus on surviving the consequences of being wrong. The dot-com speculators in the 90s were certain they were right about the internet.
And they were. The internet did change the world.
But they put all their money into tech stocks at astronomical valuations. They had no margin of safety. So when they were wrong about the timing and the price,
They got wiped out.
entirely wiped out. The margin of safety is what keeps you in the game. It ensures that when you inevitably make a mistake, you don't face absolute ruin. You survive, and your wealth can compound over a lifetime.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. Let's really synthesize what we've covered. If you want to build lasting wealth, you do not need a genius IQ.
No supercomputers required.
Right. You don't need to predict the future or find the next hot stock. What you need is character.
Humility and emotional discipline.
You have to know the difference between analyzing a true investment and just treating Wall Street like a casino.
And knowing your style. Are you setting up a defensive autopilot with index funds, or are you doing the grueling work of an enterprising investor?
And whatever you choose, you have to tame Mr. Market. Don't let his manic mood swings dictate your actions.
Treat his fluctuations as an opportunity, not a command to panic, and always, always demand a margin of safety.
You control the controllable. You can't control what the market does tomorrow, but you can control your transaction costs, your diversification, and your behavioral responses. Before we wrap up with a final thought, I want to mention one more time. If you'd like to explore this book in greater depth, consider reading the original version. You'll find the purchase link in the YouTube products section.
It really will change the way you look at your portfolio.
It absolutely will, which leaves us with something for you to mull over the next time you open your financial app on a volatile day. Imagine if the stock market shut down tomorrow, and it didn't provide a single price quote for the next 10 years. Would you still feel secure and comfortable owning the investments you hold right now? Are you truly investing in underlying businesses, or are you just gambling on price tags? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Be sure to tell us in the comments which book you'd like us to summarize next. Book Baani English, where every book speaks.